This week we were asked to talk about different differences between homeschooling and charter schools. The article that I found was Meet the Brady Bunch family with 7 kids that were in college by age 12. And basically what this mom did was she just allowed her students, or her kids that were her students, to go ahead and choose what they liked and take a little bit of this kind of concept on learning as if you like that, do some more research on your own to be able to figure out what you like. And then that way they were all able to go to college by age 12 because they were interested in researching and learning for themselves. Some other people in the class brought up private schools, then that they don't have public standards. And what I found very interesting about this was it talked about how these teachers didn't even have to have a degree when it came to private schools, and that they weren't held to the same levels and standards that a public school was. And I thought this was very interesting just because I thought all teachers had to have some sort of education. And then when I looked at this article about Arizona charter schools and stuff like that, it basically just talked about how charter schools in Arizona, they are free and they are funded by the state of Arizona. And so basically just talked about how it's a different kind of traditional type of learning for students. And some kids can do it and some kids don't really need it. And then this one right here talked about public versus private versus charter schools. And basically it gave the pros and cons to pay or not to pay. And it really came down to money, and was money a big concern for these public and private schools and even these charter schools, and which one was better for the future for the child. Then when I looked at this one, are private schools really better? It essentially said private schools do offer more opportunities as far as learning goes, but it doesn't necessarily mean they are better. Simply just because typically if you can afford to send your child to a private school, then then you can afford to give them more opportunities than those who send their children to a public school. When I looked at traditional school alternatives, I really liked this one because it talked about the different types of curriculums that go into a school and choosing the best one for your child. And so it kind of took a different alternative as far as looking at public versus charter versus private schools and looking at the different styles of teaching as opposed to where the teaching is being done. When I looked at private schools versus public schools, it really boiled down to money and basically the types of standards that private schools have. They're very independent and they can choose whether or not to accept students, as opposed to the public schools where they have to pretty much allow every student to come as long as they are in the boundaries. And this one talked about how this couple was basically, they did go to public school, they went to a good college, and they started exploring sending their children to a private school, but they were reluctant to do so when they valued publicly funded schools. Then they decided to support their public schools as much as possible and volunteered in the classroom regularly, and it pretty much just one talked about parent involvement and how that was such a big part of your child's education. Your child will be more educated as long as a parent is mostly involved. After doing all of this research on homeschooling versus charter schools versus public schools and private schools, we were asked to do the hacker labs. And the lab I found was called Nova Labs, and it's in Reston, Virginia. And it was basically created for the purpose of making things and rediscovering things. They promote different types of learning: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And their approach is they allow students to come in and use 3D printers, drones, laser cutters, and all these extra things that they wouldn't be able to use to go ahead and build stuff and to learn and be excited about science and put all of their ideas out there. Then we were asked to do our spreadsheets and talk about our different spiral kinematics, and so I'll go to that right now. And the spiral kinematics that I have here are 20 and 21. And basically what I learned from this is making sure that you get the events correct and put in the right order. That way you can really go ahead and figure out what your velocity, what your acceleration, all of that, what goes into it is a really big deal. And so once I did this, I was able to go ahead and look at the math and figure out, if we specifically look at 20, this one presented a huge challenge to me just as far as was the velocity, the initial velocity, negative or positive. And once I was able to do that, I was able to go ahead and find the acceleration and show that the acceleration was indeed positive, and the velocity did go up from there. And then when I looked at 20, I was able to see that there were 3 other events, and the 3 other events kind of stumped me for a while as far as figuring out what was best for me and myself to understand. And then once I was able to do that, I was able to see really the order of events. The order of events really helped me kind of understand what I was looking at. And then we were asked to create Excel sheets. And once I was able to do this, I was able to go ahead and check my answers and find that I really did do well with the mathematics portion of it, and really understanding how Excel works. It was a huge help to me as far as checking my work. And then this is 21 as well, so as you can see I did 20 and 21 kind of simultaneously. And the way I did 21 was I took the initial time and velocity and position and all of that, and I put it into one graph over here, and then I took my answer that I got from the 0.75 and I went ahead and put all of those up here, and then I was able to go ahead and figure out the answer from there on. Next one of the other things we were asked to do was a video analysis of acceleration. I chose to monitor my sister, and as you can see from the graph over here, it shows it as decreasing because she was to the left of the origin. And if I go ahead and play, you can see exactly where I went ahead and placed her points until she was off my screen. And then once I was able to do that, and I analyzed my data, I did a curve of best fit, and it gave me my best fit equation. And then I was able to go ahead and create my table to go ahead and figure out what her acceleration was. So her time started at 0.33 seconds. It ended at 2.4 seconds. Her initial position was negative 1.378 meters. Her final position was negative 6.908 meters. Her velocity started out at 2.460 meters per second and ended up at 3.4 meters per second. Her acceleration was negative at negative 1.073 meters per second per second. So that is my tracker file. I did have a few issues with this, just the fact that she was walking the wrong way across the screen. And so I made everything negative, but I still was able to use my mathematics to go ahead and figure out what her acceleration was. Another thing we were asked to do was the teach and test 8 learning. And after doing this and looking at what is track-sling, where is track-sling Montailed, how is track-sling Quasseled, this whole thing kind of jumbled me in the head at first, but I was able to understand it. And it really made me realize that in our education system today, we are just simply looking for the answer, expecting the answer to be given to us instead of having to think for ourselves as what are we looking at, what does this mean to us, and going ahead and interpreting it. And so I really liked this assignment because it made me kind of think a little bit about what everything meant to me and myself. Okay, and then finally we were asked to do our VPython. And for VPython, I went ahead and paused the video for a little while so that way I could get it all working for us. With this one, I wasn't able to figure out how to give it that 5 second delay, but I was able to use both balls, and hopefully this will go ahead and run for us. Alright, and there is that. When I did the VPython though, it really helped me learn when I had the example up over here, but after looking at it, I was able to see that, you know, the physics that went into this is not all that different than the physics that went into our spiral kinematics, and it was kind of interesting to see that kind of connection come together. Okay, I'll just go ahead and minimize that for now. And then I believe that was all that we had for this week as far as our weekly summary goes. Alright, thank you.